Division. What a great way to start the year 2015, the big election year, and a very critical year too for Nigeria. In about 6 weeks, Nigerians will march to the polls to elect their leaders in the 5th general election of Nigeria's uninterrupted democratic dispensation, which started in 1999. Of course, most Nigerians woke up on the first day of the year 2015 to President Jonathan's New Year nationwide address. The president talked tough, vowing to root Boko Haram and deal decisively with people who attempt to foment trouble before and after the elections. He then warned politicians against violence while promising free and fair, credible elections, and that every vote will count. On the economy, President Goodluck Jonathan said his government will continue to lay a solid foundation for a robust economy. We'll bring you now some of the highlights of the president's New Year message.
Tribute to the gallant officers, men and women of our armed forces and other security agencies who have been in the forefront of the war against terrorism and violent extremism in our country and sub-region. I also commend all Nigerians who have remained vigilant and cooperative with our security agencies in the fight against the common enemy. We are re-equipping and repositioning our armed forces to enhance their capacity to win the ongoing war against terror and insurgency, being very conscious of the inherent perils of our over-reliance on income from crude oil exports for national development. We are focused on accelerating the diversification of our economy. The non-oil sector, which has grown by an average of 8% in the last few years, is now a major driver of growth in our economy. The 2015 national budget, which is now before the National Assembly, is targeted at deepening our effort at becoming a non-oil economy. Given the challenges that have characterized some previous electoral contests in our country, the eyes of the world will certainly be on the conduct and outcome of our 5th post-military rule general elections. I reassure all Nigerians and the international community of our firm commitment to free, fair, and credible elections. Let us put the nation and the people first. Let us all conduct our electoral campaigns with the highest possible decorum and civility towards political opponents. Let us give INEC the fullest possible support and cooperation it requires to conduct credible and violence-free elections in 2015.
The president sent out his New Year message. The chairman of the major opposition party, the All Progressives Congress, Chief John Oyegun, also sent out his New Year message while congratulating Nigerians for making it through the new year. Well, Chief Oyegun made some very strong statements about the February 14 presidential election. A portion of his message and the text of his statement reads, and I quote, "As a party, we assure you that we will congratulate President Goodluck Jonathan and the People's Democratic Party if our presidential election candidate and the party are defeated in free and fair elections and will not go to court. However, as a party, we wish to reiterate that we would not hesitate to consider forming a parallel government if the 2015 elections are rigged either by use of security agencies, police and military to harass, intimidate and cajole voters, or through the use of a compromised independent National Electoral Commission." End of quote. That's according to Chief John Oyegun. Well, the race ahead of the 2015 general election appears to have started in earnest. These are the names of the 11 presidential candidates and their running mate. Well, we have Tunde Anifowose Kelani. For the AD, we have Rafiu Salau and ADC Nani Ibrahim Ahmed. And for the ACPN, Ganiyu Galadima. And the APC Muhammad Buhari. COA has Comfort Sonaya and HDP Ambrose Albert, NCP Martin Onovo, and PDP Goodluck Jonathan, UPP Chekwas Okori, and UDP Godson Okoye. Those are some of the 11 candidates, the presidential candidates actually, that you have seen there. Well, we have seen some very interesting scenarios play out in the run-up to the election. And the main opposition party, APC, when they were picking their vice presidential candidate, we saw some very interesting scenario play out. It took about a week before they could come out with a vice presidential candidate. Well, at long last, Professor of Law emerged being the most preferred out of the big names the party had lined up for that position. Well, Professor Yemi Osinbajo has since been picked as the running mate to General Muhammadu Buhari. And tonight, Professor Yemi Osinbajo joins me on the program. Thank you for joining us on Politics Today.
Thank you very much.
Well, let me start by asking you tonight, did your emergence come to you as a surprise?
Well, yes, it was quite a bit of a surprise because, as you know, there were several very, very well-qualified people who were mentioned at various times. So it was somewhat of a surprise to me, yes.
Surprise, because I mean, for some of us we've heard a lot of names, but your name seems to have entered into the list early enough. But the first time you saw your name, maybe online and whichever way, how did it come to you? Do you ever think that you're going to get it?
I just dismissed it. I didn't even bother to consider it. I just dismissed it.
You never thought of yourself being in these kind of shoes?
No, I never really thought that it would. I never thought it would happen, no.
Do you see yourself as a politician now?
Well, I am now. I am a politician now. I mean, anyone who is seeking electoral votes in a partisan political contest is a politician. So that's exactly what I am now, yes.
Well, as a professor of law, I mean, your work is out there for people to see, and you're respected also religious-wise as a pastor of your church. You have a lot of followership. Your members revere you so much. But now, do you think that a lot of people will have anything to hold on to for you now as a politician?
Well, for me, I think that there is really no difference in the roles that I play, either as a professor or a politician or a pastor, because all of these roles must be played in the same way and with the same motivation. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, the reason why I function as a pastor is essentially because I want to touch the lives of as many people as possible with the love of Jesus Christ, which of course means that we must, in every situation that we find ourselves, be able to help the poor, to be able to help those who can't help themselves, to stand up for justice, to stand up for what is right, and all of those things. And I believe that that will be my role even in politics. So for me, it's all of the same. There's really no difference. And I think that if I express myself in that way and show that that is my motivation, I think that people will learn that there is really no difference between any of these roles, so long as your motivations are correct. And in this case, my motivation is the same.
But one would think that it's perhaps because you've been Attorney General of in Lagos. One would think that maybe you're taking for granted the essence of politics in Nigeria and how tricky it could be. This time around, you think church business and business of politics aren't the same?
Yeah, I don't see anything as church business, if you see what I mean. Because really, even in my role in the church as a pastor, my major message is that the church must be without walls. The church must be out there impacting society. It must be out there touching the most vulnerable, touching those who are seeking justice. So my role even in the church, and that really is in my view, is what the church is all about, is what pastoring is all about, is what the message of Jesus Christ is all about. It's about touching the least. It's about touching those who have no way of defending themselves and have no way of helping themselves. And I think that that will be my role in politics. That's also my motivation in politics. Politics offers the best opportunity to touch millions of people in a way that I could never have touched them as a pastor or as a professor. Yes.
I'm very sure you're aware of some of the bad names politics have been called in Nigeria.
Absolutely.
And for someone like you who seems to be wearing some untainted garment, politically you have little or not so much to to look back to when we talk about politics. But then, are you ready for that, the task? You've not been in mainstream politics, but are you ready for the task of being in Nigeria's politics?
Yes, I am.
Not only politics, in Nigeria's politics.
I'm all set. I'm all set. I mean, you see, the truth is that one has to be humble enough to know that one doesn't have, one is not, if you like, the way you describe me is as if I'm some kind of, I don't know, gentleman with a halo on his head. You know, I don't think that I quite fit that description. But I think that one should be humble enough to accept that if you want to lead people and you want to do things that are radical in terms of that kind of the kind of leadership we want to put forward, there'll be several people heckling, several people saying don't do it, several people trying to pull you down and trying to stop you from doing it. That's just the nature of the contention between good and evil all the time. So I'm prepared for that. I'm all set for that.
Because I think one of the things that bothers the mind now for you as a person, one will be looking at the fact that politicians in Nigeria sometimes are known for to say one thing today and they do just exactly a different thing tomorrow. With your pedigree and the kind of integrity you're known for, you're ready to play that kind of dirty game.
No. First, I think that every politician or every person involved in public life, you know, must define themselves in their own way. I don't accept that every politician is a person who says something and does another. I don't think so. I think there are many good examples of politicians who stand by their word, who are known for their integrity. I certainly intend to be one that will stand by my word, you know. And frankly, you know, it's not just politicians who don't stand by their word. There are lots of people who don't stand by their word. I think it really comes down to the kind of person that you are and the kind of thing that you want to achieve. I think it's important to stand by one's word. So that one will be trusted, so that one will be able to go the distance. There's so much to do, such a long way to go. And if one is to be taken seriously, then one must do what one says. So I'm prepared to be different. If that's the general run of things, I'm prepared to be different.
You think it's not going to be a tough call to be different at this point that you are now?
Well, always it's a tough call to be different, always, you know, and I don't think that it will be any different from trying to be different in whatever one does. And that is so, whether you're a politician, you're a professor, you're a lawyer, you know, all of the things that we preach, all of the things that we say we'd like to be. We preach integrity, we preach transparency, we preach all of those things, you know, and we aspire, we work hard to at least see that we measure up to what we preach. It's tough, always tough, because you have to make those calls every day. Yeah.
All right, then. Now, we quickly go on a short break, and when we return, I will be asking my guest, Professor Osinbajo, how much he knows about his principal, the presidential candidate of the APC, General Muhammadu Buhari. Join us again.
Enter the world of luxury Swiss Street doors. With over 28 years experience, stock is of exquisite historical doors made from the finest ancient aga and ivory wood. A range of exclusive armored doors.
To the APC Vice Presidential candidate, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. Now, Professor, tell me, do you in any way see General Buhari as a tolerant person, considering his past experiences and his past duties as a former military leader? Do you see him as a tolerant person, someone how do you see him? Let me start by saying that.
First, I think that he is a very credible individual. He does what he says. He's a person of integrity. He's someone who believes that he must be careful as to the commitments that he makes. And when he makes a commitment, he always wants to fulfill that commitment. And I think that generally speaking, he is someone who, over the years, in my view, has come to embrace all of the tenets of democracy and constitutional governance. I think that he is committed to democracy, and I see that he is, in every way, someone who should be trusted and could be trusted with democratic governance. I think he's trustworthy.
When you say trusted with democratic governance, when we quickly look back at political history of Nigeria and
Yes.
The role he played in 1983 when that republic, Second Republic, was scuttled, and there and then we struggled, and a lot of Nigerians were in the trenches to make sure that we see a democratically elected president come back in Nigeria. But this is a person who was involved in that particular act and now is seeking to become president of Nigeria. Isn't that ironic?
But don't forget, though, that in 1983, when he took over power, he was hailed. That administration was hailed as a savior from what was going on at the time and all of that. I mean, as things developed, of course, things might have been different, but don't forget that at the time when he came into power, the administration was hailed. And I think that, having said that, you know, it's been, since 1983, it's been how many years? Almost 21 or so years, odd years since then. That's a long, long time. And I think as in that time, you know, we cannot judge a man in 1983. We can't judge what he was or how he was in 1983 with today.
So what exactly are you telling Nigeria about your principle?
Yes.
Now that he's a changed man, he's learned the tenets of democratic governance.
I think that is the case. I think that is the case. I think that anyone who ruled under the military, and don't forget that even under the military there were many civilians, most of those who were in office were civilians. So anyone who has ruled under the military, and under the military there was no legislature. The executive was the legislature. So the executive also made laws. Now that's entirely different now. There is a legislature now which checks whatever it is that the executive does. So it's a totally different kettle of fish. It's a totally different ball game, really. And I think that anyone who has run, such as he has, thrice at least for office, familiar with the Constitution, has contested his defeat in court, you know, has taken the pains to go to court, a long and arduous process each time. I think such a person must be seen as one that is prepared for whatever democratic governance entails. I think he's certainly prepared, yes.
I had a conversation just at this, General Buhari was seated just where you were seated. I mean, you're seated, and it seems not to be too apologetic about the takeover of some of the coups that we've seen and military rule in Nigeria.
Yes. Well, I'm not so, well, I can't speak for him, but as I said at the time in 1983, when that coup took place, it was hailed.
You think that coup was right? It's well in place.
No. Let me explain that. As far as I'm concerned, my basic contention is that at all times, you know, civilian rule is the best. You know, I mean, one cannot imagine today that there should be a coup or any such thing. I believe that civilian rule is the best, you know, and I think time has shown that civilian rule is the best. But the point also is that military intervention in the history, in the political history of Nigeria and the political history of Africa, at a time was almost what was in vogue. It was almost a seasonal thing. Military intervention. The military came and presented themselves as persons capable of rescuing the polity and saving the republic. And, you know, in many cases, you know, they were hailed when they came into office. Frankly, I don't think that he should be held up for any kind of condemnation for that era, for that period, especially, and I'm talking now for the coup. Because in those days, you know, when even democratic change was almost impossible. I mean, look at what the MPN did in those days. I mean, the so-called moonslide and landslide and all of those kinds of extreme behavior that clearly made it seem even to the opposition that change was impossible, you know, electorally or by an electoral process. I think those sorts of things encourage the coups and coup d'etats. But as I said, I'm one who is firmly convinced that civilian rule is the best option at all times.
What do you make of what people say about General Buhari as a religious bigot and a fundamentalist?
Well, I think that's unfair. I think it's unfair. And if you look at the history, I think it is clear that perhaps, and it's fair to say, that the PDP has done a fairly good job of making it appear that he is in fact a fundamentalist. I think that's unfair. And let me explain why I think that that is unfair. If you look at the history, I mean, everyone knows that General Buhari was in office from December 1983 to August 1985. In that period and immediately after it, no one ever accused General Buhari of being an Islamist. Nobody ever did. As a matter of fact, this whole charge of being an Islamist is probably about 5-6 years old. Nobody before then, and if you look at the history, if you look at the records, even the newspapers, no one ever accused him. And why was that the case? Because he simply wasn't, and he's never been a fundamentalist. Even in that period, when he was in office, his deputy was a Muslim. Tunde Diagbon was a Muslim. They were under pressure at the time to join the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries, and they refused to join the OIC when they had absolute power and absolute authority to do so. At that period also, in the period when he was in office, practically every member of his cabinet was a Christian. Almost 70% of the members of his cabinet were Christians. And he appointed them. In those days, you didn't appoint you simply appointed by fiat. The head of state had supreme authority, and he appointed them. So he worked at that time with Christians. He worked very, very, very well with them. Thereafter, and subsequently, everyone who has associated with him, you know, the likes of General Gowon, the likes of T.Y. Danjuma, and all of those individuals who have associated with him, not one single person has said that General Buhari is an Islamist or a fundamentalist or any such thing, you know. And when you look at all of his antecedents, you know, his first daughter is married to a Christian, you know, all of that doesn't, to me, you know, indicates that here is a fundamentalist or somebody who is going to Islamize the country or any of the kinds of things that we hear. But I think it's convenient for those who wish to malign him and those who are afraid of his coming into office. It's convenient for them to say he's an Islamist and to move the argument and to move the whole discourse along these religious lines and all of that. But I think that we shouldn't be deceived by that, and we shouldn't allow that to shroud or cover what really are the issues that face this country at the moment.
All right.
Yes.
Before we go into some of the issues facing this country, let me just quickly take you on the events, the post-election events and some of the violence that we saw in 2011, which some statement attributed to General Buhari of the blood of dogs and baboons and all of that, which some people say were the cause of some of the violence, where we saw core members died, we saw INEC officials being treated badly and citizens lose their lives. What's your take on that? Because a lot of Nigerians are still grieving over that particular incident.
Frankly, I think that it is completely unfair to hold General Buhari responsible for the violence that took place immediately after those elections. I think that's unfair. And really, it's like holding one person. Look at violence, political violence, generally speaking, everywhere in the country. There was political violence during the elections in Ondo in 1983, a lot of violence. Prior to that, there's been political violence in various places. It is difficult for anyone, and I haven't heard that any one person was held responsible for that violence, or that any one statement sometime was held responsible for that violence. I think that those who try to hold General Buhari responsible for that violence have purposes that they want to serve, obviously purely political purposes. I don't think that is fair to say that it was some comment that he made or did not make, a comment that even in context he has denied several times and has, you know, I think is unfair. I think that very many times what happens in cases where people feel cheated, or if people feel that their wishes were not reflected electorally, we've found, you know, spontaneous violence in many parts of the country, many parts of Nigeria. And at no time have I heard that one single politician or any one person was held responsible for that. General Buhari, I recall at that time in 2011, made a statement, even when all of this violence was going on, made a statement calling for the end to that violence. He made a clear statement saying that he did not support any of this violence and called for an end to that violence. I think that that's what any responsible statesman would do, any responsible person would do, you know. But I don't think that it's fair to say that he instigated the violence. I think that's very unfair.
All right. The president on the New Year's Day made some very firm statements as regarding utterances of politicians that could be divisive and inciting. And we've seen some people, I mean, even the DSS, the Department of State Security, has also said that they will not spare anything in making sure that they bring to book anybody found wanting. The statement that I read earlier on attributed to the chairman of your party saying they're going to form a parallel government. Yes. What do you make of it?
Well, that is a position.
Do you see it as inciting?
I don't think so. I don't think it's inciting. Why is that inciting? There's nothing that incites about that. I don't think that that would necessarily lead anyone to violence or lead anyone to do anything.
Forming a parallel government, that's not calling for anarchy.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
But it could be.
No, not necessarily. Look at cases. Look at cases. Let's look at political history. Look at cases where persons, where the government, for instance, has decided on where the government decides that they're going to ignore the wishes of the electorate and simply override the wishes of the electorate. What the opposition has usually done in such cases is to reject the results of the elections and to say that they will constitute their own government, that they will constitute a government. That is simply a way of taking a stand. It simply is taking a stand against the government and putting the government under pressure. That has happened in several places in Africa, several places in the world, where people have said, on account of electoral injustice, they are going to do certain things and all of that. And if they do so, so long as they do not say, so long as they do not call anyone to violence, all they're saying is that we are also going to constitute ourselves into a government. If you fail if you are unjust or if you ignore the wishes of the electorate. Personally, I don't think that that's necessarily inciting.
Because, I mean, the fabric of a national life is very tense now.
Yes.
And one is looking at the fact that little statements could spark any form of reaction or violence anywhere. Yes. Yes. And one will be thinking that in places around the world where we have seen people call for parallel government has been met with resistance, which had led to violence in some places. If we are learning from politics outside the country, we should also learn some of the get a takeaway from some of the implications of some statements.
No, I agree, but I don't think it's inciting. I don't think that necessarily is inciting. I think that how does that in any way call for violence? Because if you say it's inciting, it means that people out there on the streets will now begin to react in a particular way or begin to be violent or any such thing. I don't think so. I don't think that's inciting. I think what is inciting is where government tries to introduce division, where, for example, the kinds of statements that are made, and if you look at some of the statements that are made, statements intended to divide the country, where you accuse the opposition of being responsible for insurgency, where you accuse the opposition of attempting to Islamize and things like that, where you accuse the opposition of religious bigotry and those kinds of statements. Those are the statements that are inciting. Those are the kinds of statements that can cause division and cause crisis. And that is really, and I would respectfully ask that the president emphasizes that message to his party, to the PDP, because several of the statements that they make on a regular basis tend to be inciting, especially those statements that tend to spur religious division or spur divisiveness, ethnic divisiveness, and all of those kinds of things. I think that those are the kinds of statements that are inciting.
All right.
Yes.
Now, we'll take a moment here on the program, and when we return, the APC Vice Presidential election, where the APC Vice Presidential candidate will be talking to me about his party's chances at the polls. Join us again.
entered the world of luxury.
Been talking to me about the state of the nation and, of course, the 2015 general election. Now, General Buhari has lost to the PDP 3 times. This is his fourth time running as a president since 1999. The PDP says they will beat him yet again. What are your party's chances at the general elections?
Well, I think the chances are the best they've ever been. The party's chances are the best they've ever been. This is a situation where the whole country is calling for change. The whole country is saying that they're simply fed up with all these years of misgovernance. They're fed up. The entire nation is tired. You know, so I think that is the very best chance that the opposition has ever had. You know, and frankly, you know, if you hear the hard cry of people on the streets and everywhere, it's clear that people are tired. They're just simply fed up with the government.
So you think if the people are tired of the,
yes.
Like you said, of the government of the day, you think your party is a right alternative?
Absolutely, the right alternative.
Why do you think so?
Well, because this is a party that has laid out clearly what it intends to do and how it intends to go about doing what it intends to do. This is a party that has produced or that has shown, even in other states where it is currently in office, that good governance is not rocket science, that it can be done. In Lagos, in Osun, in Ekiti, even under Fayemi, in your state, everywhere where you see an APC government. They have demonstrated that clearly good governance is not rocket science. Improving infrastructure, improving the lives of people is not rocket science. It can be done. And I think that our manifesto and all of the different programs that we're proposing clearly, is, compared to what we see today, is night and day.
What is different in the crop of politicians that we see in your party today? Is there anything different? Are they not the same politicians we've been seeing for the...
No. When you say different in terms of politicians, I mean, Nigerians are Nigerians. But that's not the issue. The issue is that now you have a political party that has a clear manifesto. It has picked its candidates. Its candidates are credible. General Buhari is someone that we all know will do what he says he will do. He's honest, he's forthright. He's a man who has integrity, who will manage resources well. So clearly, the situation is entirely different. We're dealing here with known quantities, and I think that if you look at the APC's manifesto, very clearly stated, and all of the programs that are intended, General Buhari will implement those policies faithfully, and we will see a sea change, we'll see a dramatic change in the life of this country.
Well,
I'm completely
so
convinced
basically,
about that. Yes.
We're not seeing change in the crop of the politicians in APC. Is the manifesto that you're preaching now?
No. The politicians, people in the APC are people who are committed to a program. Now, when a party gets into government, it must have a policy, it must have a program, and that's why we have a manifesto. That is why we have picked the leaders that we have picked. We picked the president, the vice president, we picked other people, other candidates, and we picked those who we think will be able to implement those policies. You know, and it's very simple and very straightforward. Whatever it is that a government does, I mean, today, whatever the government of President Jonathan does, he is held responsible for it. And that's the way it should be. It must be held responsible for it. We are dealing here with an executive presidency. And that's how it works anywhere in the world, where you have executive presidency. General Buhari will also be held responsible for the policies and parties of his government, regardless of who else is in his party. A political party has all manner of people. That's what a political party represents. But once a political party has a set of programs, and it appoints or nominates those who can effect and implement those policies, then it is to those people that you must then look. It's to those individuals you must look.
Interesting. Before we go into in-depth into your manifesto and what you are bringing to the table, take a look at your party, Professor Osinbajo. It's a combination of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah. And one would think that does your party have the goodness in it, rank, to bring the alternative that Nigerians really want?
Yes. Well, I mean, when you say the good, the bad, and the ugly, that sounds to me like everything, every family, every community, you would have the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, so that's not necessarily a bad thing, that within one community or within one party, you have the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But I must say that at the heart of the APC is a set of ideals which I believe has never had a chance in this nation. The tendency that the APC represents, the central core, that tendency that the APC represents, has never ruled in this country before. Has never, centrally, I'm talking of central government.
So that's the reason why you think Nigerians should trust the APC in this matter?
Yeah. I'm saying that the core, the central core of that, of the APC, what the APC believes in centrally, has never had a chance in this nation. And what does it stand for? It stands for all, first of all, it is the first time that a political party says clearly that its policies and principles are guided by reference to what the man on the street desires, what the man on the street requires in this country. And everything, the question that we ask regarding every policy is, how does this make the life of the common man better? With many of the policies, we ask, how many jobs will this create? How will this solve the unemployment problem? And that is the core of the APC.
All right.
Yes.
Let's look at, let's break it down gradually and see some of what, just in brief, before we go into details of what your program says, tell me, what does your manifesto look like?
Well, our manifesto is essentially, you might, in an ideological sense, is left of center, in an ideological sense. In other words, we're looking at how the government can better the lives of the people, first of all, directly, and then by encouraging business and industry to do the same. So at the core of the manifesto of the APC is the common man, is the average person, the man on the street, at the core of that manifesto. So we have social programs. For the first time, we're going to have social security for the very first time. And that's probably the first in Africa. Our focus is on jobs for young people, on employment and all of that. We're also going to have universal health insurance. For the first time also in this country, we're going to have conditional cash transfers, which is part of our social welfare policies. Conditional cash transfers for the poorest people in society. We're looking at several different options for power and all of that, because we believe that power, the centrality of power is what makes it difficult now for industry to take off and for business, generally speaking, to take off in this country. So,
I mean, that power that you just mentioned, yes. A lot of people will think that for so many years, we've been over 30 years now, we've been battling to get it right, and electricity and power stands at the thrust of any economy.
Yes.
What are you hoping to do? It's been private. Yes. The sector is largely been privatized now.
Yes.
What are you going to do differently, specifically?
There's so many.
In the first few years.
I think the first thing that we have to understand about power and some of the reforms that have taken place is that those reforms need to go much further, and there are many issues that need to be taken into account. One of those is that we need to privatize transmission, because you can't leave transmission unprivatized and simply just be managed by some company. That needs to be privatized as well.
Considering the legal implications of that.
Yeah, there's no, I mean, if you simply write the regulations. I mean, we're saying that you need to privatize that transmission as well, because that's an important process in the entire value chain of power generation and, power generally.
And you think that's the problem, that's what will change it?
That's an issue, The other issue is that gas, as you know, I mean, we don't have a gas infrastructure in place yet. Now, that gas infrastructure could take us 10 to 15 years to actually put in place. Now, with the gas infrastructure that we have at the moment, of course, you know that most generating plants simply don't have gas and can't get gas. Part of the problem is capping the price of gas. So there are many producers of gas who are not interested in even supplying the gas because it's not worth their while. So we need to deal with that issue. We need to deal with the issue of the pricing of the gas so that it's worthwhile for producers of gas. Because if it's not worthwhile for them, we're never going to get the gas. The other point which needs to be made is that even that whole process of investing in that sector in Nigeria is so convoluted. There are too many agencies and all sorts of approvals here and there. What we need to do is to have a one-stop shop for approvals for power generation. In some cases, people come into this country wanting to invest, and they spend 3 years, 4 years, just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And that's a process that you shouldn't have when you have an emergency, because our power situation is an emergency. We also have the problem of our gas mix, even the gas mix. We ought to be able to, I mean, look at Lagos State. Lagos State has IPPs here and there. There are about 4 IPPs. And that's another issue. That's something that we ought to be borrowing a leaf from, and which the APC will borrow a leaf from. We must decentralize. You cannot have one grid. Everything must go through the grid. We must decentralize. If you don't decentralize, you cannot solve the problem of power quickly enough. You can't.
All right. You mentioned that the issue of power is something of emergency. I remember that the likes of Chief Bola Ige has handled that sector, but things have not really changed. Perhaps time has not really permitted people like that to really put their hands in changing the situation. It's been so long a time. What time frame do you think power can be tackled in Nigeria because it's of emergency? Well, if your party gets it.
My take is this. I'm not prepared to commit to a day or a month or 6 months or 1 year and all of that. But we must understand that when Chief Bola Ige made the statement, power was not even privatized. I mean, he was saying that this public utility, doing more or less, using the same facilities, could actually improve. But we are talking now of a totally different set of factors. And my belief is that if what the APC proposes is done, if the APC is voted into power, and all of these issues that we're outlining are dealt with as we expect them to be dealt with, we will be able to see a very significant improvement in power supply in this country. Definitely, we'll be able to see a significant.
So you agree that the present government has done it right, has gotten it right by privatizing in the first place?
Oh, privatization is an important step. Oh, very important step. But you see, you must privatize the whole hog. You can't privatize a bit, And I'm saying that in terms of policy, in order to get these things right, we must go the whole hog. You can't say I'm privatizing a bit and I'll leave some out. We know that public utilities generally, left in the hands of government in one shape or the other, simply don't work. We've seen too many years of experimenting with that. So that ought to be done. That whole thing ought to be done. We ought to deal with the pricing of power. We ought to deal with decentralization, and that's a very important issue. Decentralization. Look at what Lagos State is doing. It has IPPs. They have 4 IPPs now. One on the island, which supplies power to most public buildings, to most of the public buildings on the island, supplies power to street lights. And the others, there's one that supplies power to the general hospital and all of that. Now, that way, if we decentralize in that way, don't forget that those do not go through the grid, But they deal with power situations in the different areas. Lagos State has also done a census of power needs by local government. So I can tell you today what power is required, or how much power is required in Surulere area. I can tell you how much power is required in Amuwo Odofi, and all of those things. Now that is very important. That census, that whole survey of the power needs is a very important step, because that also helps you to determine, especially if you are going to decentralize, what kind of power generation facilities, what kind of transmission and all of those kinds of facilities, distribution, etc., that you need in every particular location, every particular locality. Right. So I think that all of those are important in order to make things happen.
Let's quickly move into some other issues. Insurgency is something that that confronts us, and it's giving us a sad taste in the mouth. And one would think that with what is going on in the country is not something we will ever envisaged as a people. How do you hope that your party will handle it if you get it?
I think that the first thing to understand is that insurgency, this current insurgency, is one which requires the commander-in-chief to lead from the front. The commander-in-chief simply has to be the commander-in-chief, and he must lead from the front. He must set the example by leadership from the front. The second thing is that one of the problems that I think bedeviled this the way this was handled, was that rather than face up to the challenge of the insurgency, the government preferred to politicize it, blame the opposition for the insurgency, and all of those kinds of things. Whereas what was required, and at that moment what was required, was to galvanize the entire society, political parties, everywhere where you've seen insurgency, Syria and all those places, Pakistan. The government in power galvanizes the entire society behind it. Bipartisan, multi-party meetings are held to ensure that the threat on the territorial integrity of the country is contained. You don't politicize those kinds of issues. That's a wrong thing to do. And what this government will do, what the government of General Buhari, by the grace of God, will do in 2015, will be first to ensure that the entire nation is behind all of the efforts, and we will deal with this on a bipartisan basis, on a multi-party basis.
You think the entire nation is not behind the efforts of the government of the day?
It's very difficult to expect that when you are accusing people left and right.
With some of the challenges, challenges go away if your party gets...
Yes, because you will approach it correctly. You'll approach it correctly. One of the most important things to do is to ensure that you do not look for instance, we certainly will not be blaming or looking for faults in the PDP or saying, oh, the PDP is responsible for the insurgency. You're a government. You want to solve the problem. You can't politicize the problem. If you do, then you're going to have a situation where rather than facing the central challenge, you are busy arguing about who is responsible. When you know that the opposition is not responsible, everybody knows that the opposition cannot be responsible.
You know, the insecurity in the Northeast is one issue.
Yes.
Curbing and curtailing the insecurity situation that bedeviled the Niger Delta for a long time, which of course the amnesty program came and brought to his news. How does your party hope, is your party thinking about that kind of situation?
I was actually, trying to outline what the party's policy on this is. As I said, the commander-in-chief leads from the front. We seek the support of every political party, every political association, every group behind the government. The third thing is that we equip our military properly. We ensure that the military is well equipped for the task that faces it. And the Nigerian military needs to be well equipped. Those gentlemen who are in the Nigerian military are some of the best and finest soldiers that you'll find anywhere. I worked with many of them when I was working with the UN in Somalia. One particular Nigerian was in the military police, Pat Akem. He was the one responsible for the entire UNISOM operation, policing the entire UNISOM operation, a military officer. Everybody on the mission wanted Nigerian troops to work with them. So the Nigerian troops are great. They are fine soldiers. What they need is equipment and motivation, and that ought to be done. The fourth thing is that we have to deal with the problems of poverty. We have to deal with it. If you don't deal with the problems of poverty, especially in the north, where if you look at the indices, there's even greater poverty than anywhere else. If you don't deal with the problems of poverty and unemployment, you're going to have a situation where the Boko Haram have a steady source of a steady pool of men, young men, prepared to go along with it on the promise that wherever they go, if they manage to steal anything or loot anything, including women, it will be theirs.
All right, just quickly, so that we the issue of economy, the austerity measures, the state of the naira, dwindling oil prices, the economy surely is in some very challenging moment at this time. Does your party have the answer to a crisis that seems to have a global outlook?
Let me explain that. That the problem of the Nigerian economy, in my own opinion, first is management of resources. And that is very critical to the way that the APC government will deal with issues. Nigeria's problem is not just a matter of dwindling resources. No, it is a problem of management of resources, and we mustn't belittle that in any way. And let me explain why that is the case. If you look at some of the issues surrounding the Nigerian economy, one of the major things you find is the complete lack of accountability. We were told by the central bank governor at some point that 20 billion, that's almost 3.3 trillion, was unexplained, unaccounted for. Now that is a significant loss. How about 8 billion in the kerosene subsidy scam? And all of these billions that are missing. What a government needs to do is, first of all, to ensure that it is transparent, especially in the accounting for the major resource of this country, which is oil. It must be transparent. That must be clear for all to see. If you don't manage resources well, it doesn't matter how much oil is. Even if oil goes to $500 a barrel, don't forget that we've had, for 5 years consistently, the highest oil prices that we've ever known in the history of our oil industry. And after those 5 years, see where we are. So it really doesn't matter how much oil costs. It doesn't matter whether resources are dwindling or going up. If you don't manage resources well, if you're not accountable, if you don't fight corruption, especially in the oil industry and generally in the public space, you're going to find exactly the same problem. We'll be where we are today, and we will carry on as if this is a global problem and we're faced with a global problem.
So
I think it's a management of resources issue.
So briefly, how do you hope to tackle corruption?
First, now that's very important. The most important thing first of all, we know that leadership is primary. There is no one who does not accept that General Buhari is a person known for his stand on corruption. Now that is very important because the president must have a strong anti-corruption stand. Now when the president has a strong anti-corruption stand and the institutions are allowed to function, which is, if you look in our manifesto, that's exactly what we intend to do. The president has the political will to fight corruption. The institutions are built up, the EFCC, ICPC, NFIU, all of the institutions that are concerned with the anti-corruption struggle are allowed to work, and they're allowed to do their business, and everybody realizes that there will be a consequence for corruption, that there will be consequence. The moment people understand that there will be consequence for corruption, everybody's behavior is modified. If you think that there will be no consequence, which generally seems to be the case, then the impunity will continue.
All right. Yeah. Professor Osinbajo,
yes.
Tell me, do you have the blessings of your general overseer, Pastor Yemi Osinbajo, you contesting for a vice presidential seat?
Let me say that Pastor Yemi Osinbajo, of course, I mean, he's someone who not only is he my spiritual father, and I must consult with him before I take any major steps, especially because I'm also a pastor under him. You know, I would certainly not contest elections or do any public thing without at least seeking his consent and ensuring that I discuss it with him in full. Yes.
Interesting. Let me quickly take you to this visual. Of course, I know that we've seen some sort of a tacit endorsement of President Jonathan by the General Overseer. If you remember this very event in 2014, when President Goodluck Jonathan visited your church at Banana Island, you were the one that received him and introduced him. Of course, you probably didn't know that you were going to be a vice presidential candidate of your party. So if there's some form of endorsement have come from your general overseer, isn't that a conflict of interest now?
First,
okay, that's it.
Do you want me to answer the question? Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Okay.
All right, so that's you in
yes.
February 16, 2014, receiving President Jonathan. Of course, the church, Pastor Adeboye, some form of endorsement. We've seen him pray for President Jonathan at the Redemption Camp in 2010.
Yes. But let me explain. First of all, the clip that you have shown was Pastor Adeboye in our church, and President Jonathan chose the same occasion because he wanted to worship in the same church where Pastor Adeboye was, chose the same occasion to visit our church. And of course, if the president chooses to come to our church every Sunday, we will openly and happily welcome him. Of course, we'll welcome him. Right. That is not an endorsement of the president. The mere fact that we welcome him. If you come to my church, I'll be happy to welcome you. If the president comes, I'll be happy to welcome him. If the entire opposition comes to church, we'll be happy to welcome him.
All right, thank you so much, Prof. So you are saying that you will swim against your party's decision, even if it's not favorable to your own kind of integrity?
No. I don't understand. Is this
you're taking the party's platform now. I'm saying now
okay.
that from all of our conversation, you've taken the party's manifesto now, and you're running it with it.
Yes.
For whatever comes after it, you swim with it.
Yeah. I mean, I accept the position of the party. As a matter of fact, I was one of those who was involved in the drafting of the manifesto of the party. So I'm very much a part of everything that is in that manifesto.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, for joining us. I wish you luck in all your endeavors. Well, of course, the conversation continues on our different social media platforms, and in the coming days, we hope to welcome Nigeria's Vice President, Architect Nnamdi Sambo, who is the Vice Presidential candidate of the PDP. So we can hear from him also what his party has for Nigerians as we enter into the 2015 election. Well, that's how far we can go today on the program. On behalf of the team here at Channels Television Headquarters in Lagos, thank you, Professor Osinbajo, for joining us. I'm Yemi Osinbajo. Bye for now.